The year was 1957. The world shuddered as news broke of a horrifying discovery in rural Wisconsin. A man named Ed Gein, an unassuming figure from the small town of Plainfield, had been arrested. Inside his dilapidated farmhouse, a scene straight out of a nightmare awaited investigators. The macabre artifacts found within would cement Gein's place in criminal history and forever brand him as the inspiration for some of horror's most iconic villains. Gein's case was not merely about the murders he committed, but about the depraved world he inhabited. His obsession with death, his fascination with the human body, and his complete detachment from reality painted a portrait of a mind consumed by darkness. His crimes transcended the boundaries of conventional understanding, offering a chilling glimpse into the darkest recesses of human potential. Even today, decades after his death, the name Ed Gein continues to evoke a unique blend of horror, fascination, and morbid curiosity. Edward Theodore Gein was born in 1906, the second of two boys, to George and Augusta Gein. The family lived on a secluded farm outside of Plainfield, Wisconsin, a setting that would later become synonymous with Gein's crimes. From the outset, young Eddie's life was shaped by a toxic mix of familial dysfunction and religious extremism. His father, George, was an alcoholic and an abusive presence in the household. His mother, Augusta, a devoutly religious woman with a domineering personality, exerted a suffocating control over her sons, especially Eddie. Augusta instilled in her sons a deep fear of the outside world, preaching that women were instruments of sin and that all forms of sexuality were evil. She reserved a special kind of scorn for Eddie, whom she considered weak and effeminate. Isolated from their peers and subjected to their mother's twisted worldview, Eddie and his brother Henry grew up in an environment devoid of normalcy and healthy social interaction. As Eddie entered adolescence, his interest in death and anatomy began to manifest, fueled by his morbid curiosity and his mother's graphic biblical readings, which often focused on death, punishment, and the horrors of hell. In 1940, George Gein died of heart failure, a result of his years of heavy drinking. His death, while tragic, did little to alter the dysfunctional dynamics of the Gein household. If anything, it solidified Augusta's control over her sons, particularly Eddie, who remained completely devoted to his mother. However, fate, it seemed, had other plans. In 1945, Augusta suffered a stroke, leaving her bedridden and dependent on her sons for care. Eddie, ever the dutiful son, tended to his mother's needs with unwavering devotion, but his psyche was slowly unraveling. Augusta's death, later that year, proved to be a turning point in Eddie's life. The one person who had both nurtured his darkest impulses and provided a fragile tether to sanity was gone. He was alone, adrift in a world he both feared and craved. It was in this period of profound isolation that Eddie's macabre fascinations began to consume him entirely. He sealed off sections of the farmhouse, turning them into shrines dedicated to his dead mother. He began spending more and more time in the local cemetery, not merely visiting graves, but digging them up, exhuming corpses, and taking them home. On November 16, 1957, local hardware store owner Bernice Worden disappeared. Her son Frank, who was also the Plainfield deputy sheriff, found a disturbing clue at the store, a sales slip with Ed Gein's name on it. Armed with a search warrant, Frank Worden and Sheriff Art Schlee went to the Gein farmhouse. What they discovered inside would shock the world and etch the name Ed Gein into the annals of criminal history. The house was in a state of squalor, filled with trash, rotting food, and an overwhelming stench of decay. But it was the objects scattered throughout the house that truly horrified the investigators. They found bowls made from human skulls, chairs upholstered with human skin, lampshades fashioned from stretched skin, and a belt made of female nipples. In the bedroom, they discovered a gruesome tableau, a headless body hanging upside down, dressed in a suit of human skin. It was Bernice Worden. Section 5. Fashioned from flesh. The artifacts of a deranged mind. The sheer depravity of the items found within the Gein farmhouse shocked even seasoned investigators. It wasn't just the presence of human remains, it was the way Gein had incorporated them into his everyday life, transforming them into grotesque parodies of domesticity. He had crafted masks from the faces of his victims, preserving their features in a horrifying mockery of life. He had fashioned a wastebasket from a human torso and a pair of leggings from human skin. Each object told a story of obsession, delusion, and a complete disconnect from the sanctity of human life. Gein's creations were not merely the product of a sadistic mind. They were the tangible manifestations of a psyche warped by isolation, repressed desires, and a morbid fascination with death. The items found in his home transcended the realm of simple murder, crossing over into a macabre artistry that both repulsed and captivated the world. Section 6. Victims of the Grave, Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan. While the discovery of Bernice Worden's body in Gein's farmhouse confirmed the worst fears of the investigators, it was Gein's own confession that shed light on the full extent of his crimes. He admitted to killing Worden, shooting her with a .22 caliber rifle before taking her body back to his farmhouse. He confessed to exhuming numerous bodies from local cemeteries, driven by an insatiable desire to possess and interact with the dead. But Bernice Worden was not Gein's only victim. He also confessed to the murder of Mary Hogan, a local tavern owner who had disappeared in 1954. Gein's confession painted a chilling picture of a man who had surrendered to his darkest impulses, transforming from a reclusive oddity into a full-fledged monster. His crime shook the small town of Plainfield to its core, leaving an indelible scar on its psyche and casting a long shadow over its future. Section 7. Declared insane trial and institutionalization. In November 1957, Ed Gein stood trial for the murder of Bernice Worden. The world watched in horrified fascination as the details of his crimes were laid bare. However, the trial was short-lived. Gein's attorneys, led by the court-appointed attorney William Belter, did not contest the accusations but instead focused on their client's mental state. They argued that Gein was not of sound mind at the time of the murders and was therefore not legally responsible for his actions. After a 10-day trial, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning with a verdict: not guilty by reason of insanity. Gein was committed to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane in Waupun, Wisconsin. He would spend the rest of his life confined within the walls of various mental institutions, his crimes forever etched in the annals of criminal history. The trial, while swift, did little to quell the public's morbid fascination with Gein. His case continued to generate headlines, inspiring books, films, and countless nightmares. Section 8. A macabre muse: Gein's enduring influence on horror. While Ed Gein's crimes shocked and horrified the world, they also sparked a morbid fascination that continues to this day. His case, with its grotesque details and unsettling psychological implications, seeped into the collective consciousness, becoming a source of inspiration for countless works of horror in literature, film, and music. Gein's influence can be seen most prominently in the horror genre, where his crimes provided a blueprint for a new breed of villain: the disturbed, isolated individual driven to murder by madness and macabre obsessions. Perhaps the most iconic example of Gein's influence is Leatherface, the chainsaw-wielding antagonist of Tobe Hooper's 1974 masterpiece, The Texas Chain Saw Massacre. Leatherface's penchant for wearing masks made of human skin, his grotesque cannibalistic tendencies, and his unsettling relationship with his family all echo elements of Gein's case. However, Gein's influence extends far beyond Leatherface. His fingerprints can be found on characters like Norman Bates from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, Buffalo Bill from Jonathan Demme's The Silence of the Lambs, and countless other villains who blur the line between madness and monstrosity. Section 9. Conclusion. The unfading shadow of Ed Gein. Ed Gein died on July 26, 1984, at the age of 77, from complications of cancer. He died within the confines of a mental institution, his physical body finally succumbing to the ravages of time. However, the specter of his crimes continues to haunt the American landscape, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can fester in the human heart. Gein's story is a cautionary tale, a stark illustration of the destructive power of isolation, repression, and unchecked obsession. While the world remembers Ed Gein as a monster, it is important to remember that he was once a human being, shaped by the forces of his upbringing, and driven to madness by the demons within. His case, while horrific, offers a glimpse into the fragility of the human psyche and the devastating consequences of unchecked mental illness. The legacy of Ed Gein is a complex one, a chilling tapestry woven from equal parts horror, fascination, and a profound sense of unease that continues to resonate with audiences today.